The clock now.
We on the record? On the record, Shelley? Seeing at 6 p.m., I'd like to call the September 7th, 2022 regular meeting of the Kenai City Council to order and ask that if you were able, would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Baisden?
Here.
Councilmember Sonart?
Here.
Councilmember Petty?
Here.
Student Representative Thibodeau?
Here.
Councilmember Winger?
Here.
Councilmember Nackstead?
Here.
Mayor Gabriel?
Here.
Vice Mayor Glendenning?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Council, before we get to agenda approval, I'd like to call your attention to a laydown you should have in front of you with requested additions to the packet. Action add to item O, information items, dog park, Thursday, September 1st, 2022, requested by Councilmember Winger. Pleasure, Council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I move for approval of the agenda with the added item O, request unanimous consent. Second.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there an objection? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next, that brings us to the consent agenda. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I move for approval of the consent agenda and request unanimous consent.
Second.
Is there anybody on the body that would like to amend the consent agenda at this time? Seeing none, have the clerk, would you please read the consent agenda into the record?
Approval of the August 17th, 2022 City Council meeting minutes. New business action approval, bills to be ratified, brought to you by the administration. Action approval, purchase orders over $15,000, brought to you by the administration. Ordinance number 3306-2022, amending Kenai Municipal Code 7.15.020, purchases requiring council approval to provide increased flexibility for the administration to conduct city business while maintaining sufficient safeguards to protect the public interest. Brought to you by Councilmember Baisden, public hearing on September 21st, 2022. Ordinance number 3307-2022, amending Kenai Municipal Code 7.25.020, city budget controls to provide increased flexibility in the expenditures of funds and management of city budgets while maintaining adequate internal controls to protect the public's interest. Brought to you by Councilmember Baisden, public hearing on September 21st, 2022. Ordinance number 3308-2022, accepting and appropriating a grant from the state of Alaska for the purchase of library materials. Brought to you by the administration, public hearing on September 21st, 2022. Ordinance number 3309-2022, accepting and appropriating funds from the Public Library Association and AT&T for the Kenai Community Library's participation in the PLA Digital Literacy Workshop Training Incentive. Brought to you by the administration, public hearing on 9/21/22. Ordinance number 3310-2022, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund, police department for the receipt of a vehicle forfeited to the state of Alaska. Brought to you by the administration, public hearing on September 21st, 2022. Ordinance number, multitasking. Ordinance number 3311-2022, determining that real property described as Lot 5, Block 1, Gusty Subdivision Edition Number 1, according to plat number 83-126 KRD, city-owned airport land located outside of the airport reserve is not needed for public purpose, waiving KMC 22.05.095, method of sale or disposal, and authorizing the sale of the property to Aaron Swanson, DBA Forever Business Plaza LLC. Brought to you by the administration, public hearing on September 21st, 2022. Ordinance number 3312-2022, determining Lot 4, Block 1, Gusty Subdivision Edition Number 1 amended is not needed for public purpose, and approving the execution of a lease with an option to purchase between the City of Kenai and Aaron Swanson for the property. Brought to you by the administration, public hearing on September 21st, 2022. Ordinance number 3313, 2022, accepting and appropriating funds from the State of Alaska Department of Natural Resources, Division of Forestry, and the United States Department of Agriculture, Forest Services, to support the city's spruce beetle mitigation and hazard fuel reduction program, and authorizing the city manager to execute a memorandum of agreement for this funding. Brought to you by the administration. Public hearing on September 21st, 2022. Ordinance number 3314, 2022, extending the time period for completion of action items necessary for conditional donation of approximate 2-acre parcel to be subdivided from a portion of the 6.8-acre, more or less, portion of the east of Tract 4A, Barron Park 2020, replat, KPB parcel number 0450135, to Triumvirate Theater for the development of a theater facility. Brought to you by the administration. Public hearing on September 21st, 2022. Ordinance number 3315, 2022, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund and public safety capital project fund for cost of excess of budget amounts for the fire department apparatus bay flooring refinish project. Brought to you by the administration. Public hearing on September 21st, 2022, and that is your consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to any item that's on the consent agenda, which was just read into the record? Anybody? Nobody online? Nobody in chambers? Seeing none, unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection from council for unanimous consent of a consent agenda approval? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. That brings us to scheduled public comments, which we have nobody here this evening. Next, we have unscheduled public comment. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to address the council this time on any item that's not on the agenda or consent agenda? Mr. Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Bob Malloy, business address 110 South Willow, across the street in Kenai, and council members and city manager Ostrander. Just want to tell you about a little event that needs great appreciation for the little things that Kenai Fire Department does. And so I'll get there eventually, but my spouse and I are going on a trip to Canada later this week, and we haven't been out of the country since pre-COVID, and the last time we went to Canada, you just needed a passport. And now you need to go to the government website, Arrive Canada, and put in all your data, like your passport number and how you're going to go there and where you're going to be staying at and stuff like that. But you also have to upload your COVID card. So we're there doing this, and then you can do it in advance, but you can't give them your travel information until 72 hours before you go, which was today. But when we were doing it, come to find out, one of us misplaced their COVID card. We don't have it. That's critical data. So I said, well, we all had the one provider. It was KFD. So I called KFD, and they said, sure, we got your data. We can have a card for you in 10 minutes. So, went across the street. One of us went across the street, picked up his or her card, imaged it, and finished the Arrive Canada deal. And just thought those are some of the little things that KFD does for us that's you might not know about. And just wanted to express appreciation for that, and then for administration and the council for supporting what KFD has done for public health and welfare with the boosters and the clinics, especially for our seniors at the senior center. People may not think that the public health and welfare is part of public safety, but it really is. They've done a really great job, and I don't know what your plans are going forward relating to that, but definitely would encourage you to continue supporting KFD, if they're gonna do clinics, for seniors or something or whatever with the new shots for the variants, or the annual thing. It was really a great service that they did for the public, and I was truly amazed that we could get that fixed. If we had gone to a bunch of different providers, it might have been a problem, but, one card just like that. So thanks again for supporting that. That's all I got for you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for former council member Vice Mayor Malloy? Councilmember Winger.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I just want to say safe travels and enjoy yourself.
Thanks. It's kind of a roots deal. Part of my family came to Ireland through Newfoundland in a couple of generations, so we're going to go check that out. So it'll be fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Good seeing you again, Bob.
Good to see you all too, and thanks for your service.
Is there anybody else, we're on unscheduled public comment, is there anybody else from the public that would like to address the council at this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Ms. Nelson?
I hate to be the same old thing, but here I am again, Marion Nelson of the Kenai Arts Center. We have the annual harvest auction, which hasn't been annual for a while, and, you know, kicking back into gear again like so many organizations are. September 24th, 6 o'clock, incredible food, incredible auction items. The silent auction items are on the wall now for bidding, and you can bid on them. You can't own them if you bid the stated value, but you can pick it up at the end of the month, if indeed you do bid that amount. Otherwise, you can just go back again and again and watch how the bidding goes up on your favorite piece. It looks great. On the other side of the wall or the gallery are the outcry auction items, of which we have almost more than we can handle. A few more coming in yet, so no more, no more. Just want to let you know, of course, you're invited. We'd love to have you there. $50 a ticket. Again, the food will be great from the Hearth Eatery. And as far as the gallery itself is concerned, or the building itself is concerned, there's the ongoing issues with water coming off the roof and coming in through the crack in the floor between what is what we call the courtyard area and the potter's room. It's a chronic problem. It has yet to be fixed. Maybe it'll never get fixed. I don't know. Fortunately, it does come in the floor, onto the floor, right by the electric kilns, but those electric kilns sit this far off the floor. So they really are not a safety hazard in any way at this point in time. But we are constantly aware of the water issue in the building, especially in that place. So it goes on. We try to keep thinking of ways to do it that wouldn't cost much, or ways to do it that would cost a lot, and just keep plugging away at it. We did just receive the Rasmussen grant for about 15 grand, which has been earmarked to do, everybody perks their ears up when you say that amount, and Rasmussen. That's designated to do floor grinding in the main gallery. We will be ripping up the carpet, which is it'll be a wonderful day. That is one ugly piece of carpet, and old at this point too. Ruins every photograph of the gallery that is posted, every few weeks online. The shows look great. The floor looks like crap. So that will happen, and then the fellow who some of you have encountered in your life here, John Bomer is his name, and he does floor grinding with cement, and it will be polished to the point where it's looks better than it does right now, but it won't be slippery. So we hope, the schedule is to do that the last 2 weeks of the year. He has time, we're closed at that time, so we'll see how that all comes together perfectly, I hope. Any questions about that?
Any question? Councilman Winger?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I think John does do great floor work. I've seen his work. I know him personally. I believe the company's name's ProGrind. But he does do some amazing work, and I've seen the color work they've done, the glitter work they've done, just the straight polishing. I mean, they do turn out some great work. So I think
We
that's
initially thought, well, we'll just really, he's willing to throw the color in, at his cost. Yippee, that's great. We'll have it look like the river on the floor, coming in, going back toward the bathroom. Well, that costs quite a bit more, and it doesn't really do us any good, and then you'd have to be a little more polished than we want to be. We have safety first as far as the floor is concerned. So there will be some color difference around the border, which will be great, and it'll go into the gift gallery where it's just the retail part toward the bathroom, and it doesn't need to go any further. The very back room was taken care of when we remodeled back there. So it'll be an improvement, and as I talked to John, he's been in the building a few times for sure, and we've talked to him about this, and my main concern initially was we lift that carpet up, which is rather ancient, and the floor, of course, is even more ancient, and probably has all kinds of cracks in it. And I said, well, this was a fire department, and so forth and so on. He said, I could polish sawdust, not a problem. So we'll go from there. I have confidence in him, for sure. Any other questions?
Councilman Warrior?
Thank you. Just one more. When will be the next feature of kid artwork? So local artists, when would young kids be able to submit their artwork
Well,
for your
for
next
sure,
show?
next year, in, I think it's March. No, I don't have my card in front of me. The annual, okay, where the school district has their show, that's kids, lots of kids. And then we also work with the Bunnell Gallery in terms of artists in the schools, money that goes to individual artists who work in the schools, both here and in Homer. The money that we give, of course, goes to the schools that are here. Not all of them, all the time, but every now and then, the elementary schools. As far as in the art center itself, it's when we have somebody who is willing to do a workshop that is aimed at kids. Now, James Adcox and I have been talking about doing art in the park for several years. He is gone, very sadly, gone from the Kenai Library. And this, this has been the perfect and the imperfect summer to try to do art in the park, which can happen all over the place. It would be art supplies on the, say, simply put, on the ground, and getting paper, getting something up on fence or trees or whatever, and making an event out of it, perhaps near the Kite Festival weekend. Anyway, it didn't happen. Maybe this summer, or who knows, But anyway, it certainly is, it's always on our mind, for sure. We're always anxious to find somebody, or somebody pops up that has a particular thing they like to do with kids or is suitable for kids. Your ideas are welcome.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments for Ms. Nelson? Thank you, Marion. Look forward to, who's your MC?
Ryan. We
Okay.
got Ryan again. He is, I announced it at Chamber today, and very fortunately for me, he was there also for other reasons. And he got up and did his announcement, and nobody else was making their announcements. So I got to go up and say, well, this is a great follow-up, that Ryan is our auctioneer. And here's not many people can evoke this kind of response. There's a little bit, in the audience. So he is very, very fun.
Yeah.
Very, very fun and funny. Very fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Marion.
Yep.
Is there anybody else from the general public that'd like to address the council this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Nobody online? Seeing none, we'll move to public hearings. We have item D1, ordinance number 3304-2022, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the airport special revenue and airport improvements capital project funds for Kenai Municipal Airport Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program updates. Councilmember Naxon.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I move to enact ordinance 3204, 2022.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3304-2022? Seeing, hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council? Councilmember Naxon.
Thank you, Mayor. For Paul, I was wondering, do we know who's going to actually be doing the plan? We have an estimate.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Naxted. I don't believe we do have that yet. Actually, Mr. Curtin might be able to answer that question. It might be our term contractor, HDL, that's going to be doing the work.
Mr. Curtin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the city manager. I'm assuming it is HDL as well. I don't know for a fact. I know that they were talking to other entities and that they were scoring some of the proposals that they received. So I'm assuming it's HDL, but I can't tell you for certain. I wasn't on the scoring committee, so.
Further discussion, comments, deliberation? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Sonart,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Student Representative Thibodeau,
Yes.
Councilmember Winger,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxted,
Yes?
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Glendenning,
Yes.
Councilmember Baisden.
Yes.
You have 7 yes votes. Ordinance 3304, 2022 is enacted.
Thank you. Next up, we have item D2, ordinance number 3305-2022, conditionally granting certain foreclosed city-owned properties described as lots 8 and 11, block 9 and lot 4, block 10, Mossman replat of additions number 1 and 2, parcel numbers 03910-211, 03910-208, 03910-304, to Central Peninsula Habitat for Humanity Incorporation for construction of housing. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I move to enact ordinance 3305-2022.
I'll second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3305-2022?
No hands raised.
Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council. Councilmember Raisden.
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe just a question for the city manager. Any idea how many properties we've done this with for Habitat Humanity? I know a few. Any ideas off the top of your head, Paul?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Baisden, the only ones I'm aware of are the ones that were approved or that are mentioned in this memo, which was the ones in 2009, which I believe was 2. Then there was also in 2017 where we donated the 5. However, only 2 were constructed, and then these 3 here. So prior to those periods, I'm not certain how often we've done it.
Thank you.
Further question? Vice Mayor Glendenning.
Yeah, I just have a question. I'd like to be reminded how this program works. I was hoping someone from Habitat for Humanity would be here to speak to this generous donation we're about to make. Anybody can fill me in on how it works, how the title ultimately transfers to the individual, or is it with Habitat Humanity, or items along that way, please?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Vice Mayor Glendenning. I'm not an expert on the process, but it's my understanding that these folks apply for houses through Habitat for Humanity. There needs to be in-kind donations by those individuals during construction of the house. They need actually help to construct. Once the house is constructed, I'm not sure how that transfer of deed works or what a monetary contribution those individuals have to make towards the house. I know that ultimately it gets people in houses at a much lower expense than would be if they built a house themselves. As far as the process for the city, the way this ordinance is constructed is they essentially have until 2028 to build the 3. The previous ordinance was a little more restrictive, which is why they had to reapply, because even though they had until 2025 to complete the 5 residences, they had to complete them in a timely manner throughout. And this one has changed where essentially if something comes up and they aren't able to get the 3 done or 1 done in the first or second year, they can still get 3 done in the last 3 years of the agreement. But obviously no one from Habitat for Humanity is here, and I am not an expert on their internal process.
Vice Mayor Glendenning.
Yeah, just one more question. Do these ultimately wind up on the tax rolls for the benefit of the city?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Vice Mayor Glendenning. Yes, they do. Both the tax rolls and obviously they're all hooked up to water and sewer as well, so they help the utility.
Further questions? City Manager, comments, deliberation? I do have a question. So this looks like it was referred to Planning and Zoning with Mr. Foster on June 17th, and I presume that there was some attachments to this, but that they approved this through the Planning and Zoning. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. It was actually at the regular meeting of June 22nd, they recommended donation.
Okay, very good. I just wanted to get that on the record because I know we were going through a transition with our planning director at the time. Councilmember Petty.
Yes, some friends of mine have been involved in this, and they're craftsmen that donate their time, construction companies that have donated their time. I know that individuals who wish to participate with Habitat Humanities, that they have an extensive application process, and there's a large number of sweat equity that's involved in the family. It allows for, in our community, to have lower income housing for individuals who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity for single dwelling homes for their families. And I think this is a great partnership with our city and our community and Habitat for Humanities. And I see it as a win-win for our whole community. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion, deliberation? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Student Representative Thibodeau,
Yes.
Councilmember Winger,
Yes.
Councilmember Nackstead,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Glendenning,
Yes.
Councilmember Baisden,
Yes.
and Councilmember Sonart.
Yes.
We have 7 yes votes. Ordinance number 3305, 2022 is enacted.
Thank you. Next up, we have resolution number 2022-62, supporting the Kenai Peninsula Borough's application for Safe Streets and Roads for All Action Plan grant and authorizing the city of Kenai to be included as a joint applicant. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Nackstead.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I move to adopt Resolution 2022-62.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2022-62? Nobody in chambers, nobody online. We'll bring it back to council. Can you give us a little bit of an overview, Mr. Ostrander, of what this entails or what we're looking at here?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So the borough came to actually all the cities of the borough and suggested that we apply for this action plan grant. And this one is approximately $1.2 million, and it would apply across the borough. So Seward, Homer, Kenai, Soldotna, and the borough itself are all engaged in this. Actually, I believe Soldovia is included as well. And what this does is it's a planning grant that there's a 20% local match, of which the city of Kenai would be responsible for about $21,500 of this match. And this would essentially look at all of the ways that people move on the borough and determine what could be done to make pedestrian paths or highways or any of those things safer. Once that the action plan is completed, that means that an entity would be qualified to apply for then an implementation grant, of which I believe there's $5 billion of federal money that's going to be available over the next 5 years. If you don't have an action plan grant, which this money would do, you're not eligible to apply for the implementation grant. So this would be the first step to get not only the borough, but all the municipalities within the borough eligible to apply for these implementation grants. So it's been really productive, encouraging conversations with the borough and all the municipalities. I know the assembly passed this unanimously last night, and I think the grant application timeline is within a week or so of this meeting.
Thank you. Councilmember Winger.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Just a follow-up question on that. Would we be able to use any of these funds from this program to maybe extend the lighting on the Kenai Spur Highway? I know that the lighting is part of that continuing project, but would we be able to use that to bring lighting closer in towards the Kenai Middle School area?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Winger. So not with the action plan grant, but once this was in place, if it determined that additional lighting infill was something that we should pursue, then we could apply through an implementation grant for that type of project.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Glendenning.
Yeah, would this plan, this overview, would it involve a comprehensive view of public transportation in our area?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Vice Mayor Glendenning. My understanding is this focuses strictly on making those transportation corridors safer. So not necessarily public transportation, although I guess one could argue that the more people take public transportation, maybe the safer our roads would be. So I guess my answer would be possibly, but my understanding is it's more focused on how to make those safer for all forms of transportation.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sonart.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. A few meetings ago, we had a gentleman speak at the microphone. Gosh, I think his name was Keith, but I remember he was from Linwood Lane, and he talked about the hazard of pedestrians on Lawton Drive. would something like this, I mean, could doing something like that, a project involving making Lawton Drive more safe for pedestrians and children's and families and bicyclists, could that fall underneath this umbrella?
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Sonart. Yes, I think that's exactly the type of things we're looking at. Things that you can put in place to make it safer for pedestrians, bicycles, vehicles, any of those different forms of transportation. So yeah, that would be something that I think once you get to the implementation grant part of it, could be very applicable.
Further discussion? Councilmember
Request
Naxton?
unanimous consent.
Very well. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2022-62 is adopted. Next up, we have resolution number 2022-63, awarding a professional services agreement and corresponding purchase order for professional mechanical and electrical engineering services for the Kenai Municipal Airport Operations Building HVAC controls and boiler replacement project. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Basin.
Move to enact resolution 2022-63.
I'll second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2022-63? Nobody online, nobody in chambers. I'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council? Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Just pulling it out of my hat, I think that MBA Consulting probably did the mechanical, electrical for that building initially, but generally it's just a question because they are less than, it's a $50,000 project for them and a $100,000 project for the other two. So I was just wondering if that had been evaluated with them.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Naxton. I'm sure it has, but Mr. Curtin can speak specifically to the conversation that he had with them.
Mr. Curtin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the city manager. Councilman Naxton, you're correct. They are the ones that did the original design. So a lot of the work is involved with the development of the CAD documents, which they already have when they originally did the work. So a lot of the hours that the other firms would have to potentially invest into that has already been accomplished by them, and they're quite familiar with the property. So that is why they are significantly lower than the others. No changes in scope of work. They all bid apples to apples to apples.
Thank you, Mr. Curtin. Vice Mayor Glendenning.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I like the idea that we're going to stagger the replacement, so not everything would potentially quit on us at one time. I like the idea that we're stepping into this. Of course, I'm a visual person. I enjoy your photos and your presentation, and I think this is money well spent for our city. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilmember Basin.
I would ask for unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2022-63 is adopted. That brings us to item G13, I'm sorry, under consent agenda, which was ordinance number 3316-2022, amending Kenai Municipal Code 14.20.150, conditional use permits to further clarify roles and responsibilities of applicants, the planning director, and the planning commission in the conditional use process. This was sponsored by Councilmember Glendenning, so appropriate to introduce for referral to the planning and zoning, and Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I move to introduce ordinance number 3316-2022 and refer the ordinance to the Planning and Zoning Commission's meeting on September 14th of 2022 to make a recommendation to the City Council and then schedule a public hearing before the City Council on September 21st, 2022.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second and request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, ordinance number 3316-2022 has been introduced and will be referred to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting and for recommendation prior to our next meeting on September 21st. Which brings us to commission committee reports. We're under H1, Council on Aging.
No report on the Council on Aging, other than their September meeting has been canceled.
Thank you. Airport Commission?
Thank you, Mayor. The Airport Commission meets tomorrow in the chambers here at 6 p.m.
Thank you. Harbor Commission?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The September meeting has been canceled, and our next meeting is in November the 7th. Thank you.
Thank you. Parks and Recreation Commission?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Parks and Recs Commission met and had a work session. They went over the June and July mid-month reports, and their next meeting will be October 6th.
Thank you. Planning and Zoning Commission?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Planning and Zoning Commission met on August 24th here in Chambers at 7. We had one item on the agenda. It was an application for a home occupation permit for music instruction submitted by a community member on Linwood Lane for property described as Lot 1A1 Event Tar Subdivision, so not replat. And it passed unanimously. There were 6 people present. And actually, there was, for something as simple as this, there was quite a lively discussion, inquiries as to, how a home occupation now works in view of our present sensibilities that we have been discussing lately. And oddly enough, they said, well, is this music going to make noise? And obviously, to my ears, no. Anybody else present here, maybe, huh? but anyway, it was serious questions, just kind of dancing around the edges of the concept of home occupations, and I'm sure we'll be seeing this, if not in the near future, in the medium future, these type of discussions, and it was instructive for me, and I'm sure everyone else that participated in the discussion grew and prospered from the mutual discussion and understanding that they had. And that's a lot to say for one item that passed unanimously rather quickly, but I appreciated the engagement on the Planning and Zoning Commission's part. Thank you. Oh, and the next meeting will be September 14th. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautification Committee?
Beautification Committee will be meeting next Tuesday, September 13th at 6 p.m. here in Chambers.
Thank you. Under Mini Grant Steering Committee, we did have a meeting a week ago Friday with a gentleman from Ned Whitney with Peninsula Crime Stoppers had submitted an application for a $500 grant. And what that would go towards is what they call Navigate 360 Anonymous Tips, which is an online way to report anonymous tips to Crime Stoppers instead of picking up the phone and calling them. It's a way for them to do that online, and it would directly go to the police department, and in some ways felt like there would be better anonymity for the people that do the tipping here. So this is nothing new, and one of the things that it did, they referenced that there's a recent crime that was solved for the Duffy case, which was a pretty big case here, and so it's nothing new, but they're in some areas it's nationwide, some areas it's more prevalent, more gaining traction, and the idea here is to sort of build that confidence, build it out, get the advertisement out there to get people to use it. Excuse me, there's a $3,600 annual, it's an annual renewal subscription. Our thought on that, they're not to that point yet as far as raising that amount of money. So what the Mini Grant Steering Committee decided to do was to donate the last $500 one-time donation. So they would be required to raise $3,100, and then we would give them the final $500 to institute the subscription instead of having that donated and no, real sense of when they would have the rest of the money raised and would be able to implement that program. And additionally, asked that when they do reach their benchmark and we do provide that $500 funding gap that they come back within a year to give the council report on how that would affect crime in the city of Kenai. So the idea is that we would help kind of get this off the ground with the intention that it would help our police department solve crimes in the city of Kenai. So that's where that's at. So it hasn't really been awarded. It's contingent upon their fundraising efforts to date. So hopefully they'll get that raised and we'll be able to accomplish that. So next up, we have report of the mayor. I did attend the industry appreciation in Kenai this year. It was a little bit different. It wasn't done last year, I don't think, or maybe even the year before that. So it's been a couple years since that was sort of resurrected here. Honestly, as much rain as we had, it's hard to believe that it did not rain the whole time. And actually, we had some little bit of sunshine peek out. But it was quite as big as it has been in the past. But there was a lot of kids there that really enjoyed, the things that we do to give away bikes over there. And Mayor Pierce it's a borough event. My role over there was supposed to be pretty minor. As it turned out, Mayor Pierce wasn't able to make it, so I ended up doing the bulk of the emceeing and what I really enjoyed, I got to tell you, is doing the things with the kids and seeing the excitement when we did there's a Frozen t-shirt contest that the kids have to kind of get that unwrapped. Then we did a buoy pull. So my suggestion is that if we do this next year is to do some more kid-related items, because that seemed to get the parents way more excited in what was going on. So other than that, we had the usual plenty of food there. A lot of people were well fed, and it turned out to be a pretty good event. And then that evening, I did attend the soup supper that was put on by the food bank, and it was held over in Soldaten at the Sports Center this year. But a lot of people there. It was a lot of auction items. I'm not sure what they raised for, but I believe they did fairly well on that event, and again was happy to take place in that and really advocate for the work that they do for our local community. So with that, I'll go to administration reports. City Manager, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. First of all, I wanted to make sure council saw that your cover looks a little bit different than this, because we reworked the cover because it was so blue intensive that we didn't want to print it out. But this is the final report of the Kenai Waterfront Revitalization Assessment. I wanted to give council a little bit of a sneak peek. We're going to have a work session on this just prior to your meeting of the 21st. We are inviting all of the commissions there, so Shelley's assured me that there's enough room in council chambers. Actually, it's the other way around. I said, it's going to be fine. But hopefully we'll be able to get everybody in here. It's going to be a full house, I hope. And the reality is we're calling it a work session, but really it's just a presentation by McKinley, and then an opportunity for folks to ask questions about the presentation. We've got an hour, but I thought it was important enough. There was enough community interest in this project that I thought it was worth having a special meeting and bringing all the commissions. That's the way we started this thing out, and I'd like to finish it that way. I am really excited about the final product. Particularly excited about the amount of community involvement that went into this. I mean, this really is the community saying, these are the types of things we'd like to see our waterfront be at some point in the future. I will caveat it with, there's a lot of information in here. There's a financial portion that says that, the improvements that the community identified in the waterfront, if the city were to do everything in there, it's going to cost you between $40 and $150 million. Okay, that's in my lifetime, that's not going to happen, but it's still a great document as a start to identify all those things that the community really want. And I think we're going to start seeing development in that area, partially because of the work that was done on this. So I'm excited for the work session, and again, gave the council this. All the commissioners will get their own hard copy at that meeting as well. So they'll have one to take with them and look at closely. And
for folks online, what time does that work session, Mr. Ostrander?
The work session is on the 21st from 4:45 to 5:45.
Thank you. Councilmember?
Just a quick question. This report is online also, correct? Through the city website?
The report is not online yet, but it will be shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have it online. Okay, in other news, on August 23rd, I met with Peter Evon, the Knightsian Indian Tribe Executive Director. You guys all met him at your last meeting. He gave me a tour of all their facilities, both the ones that are under construction and the ones that have been constructed. Spent a couple hours with them, and it was really informative and good to get to know him a little bit better. A couple days later, I actually presented to the Knightsian Tribal Council. We talked about the possible partnerships between the two organizations, how we can strengthen the relationship between the tribe and the city. And I also gave them an update on just a lot of the things that are going on in the city. One of the things that they expressed a lot of interest in when I brought up was the idea of a joint council session between the city council and the tribal council. I think it'd be another great way to really build that relationship and strengthen that partnership. So I'm going to continue to work with Peter and hopefully continue to build that relationship and get that organized so we can have that joint meeting. Also, on August 23rd, I had the pleasure of attending Sue Best's retirement party. I know Vice Mayor Glendenny and Councilmember Winger, Councilmember Nackstead were there too. You know, just so everyone knows, she actually continued to work until last Friday, 9/2, in a transitional role. Now she's gone and Lana is on her own, but she did stick around till last Friday and was working to the very last minute, I'm confident. Some of council might be hearing from some folks about an increased number of code enforcement letters or actions that the city is undertaking. Over the last 3 weeks, we've made a concerted effort to get letters out to all the properties in the city that we've received complaints on. We now have 27 active code enforcement actions, which is by far the most that I've seen since I've been here at the city. Many of them that were open during that 3-week period. I want to thank Mary Toll for her work. She worked over the last 3 weeks to really get that backlog filled. It was apparent when she dove in that we were quite a bit behind where we should have been. In addition to that, it seems that there's been a significant uptick in the number of complaints that we've been receiving about code enforcement violations in the city. And based on that, and based on some of the things that I've seen as I've driven around the city, it may be worth a discussion with council at some point about taking a more proactive role in code enforcement going forward. You know, we've been completely complaint-driven since the beginning of the city. A proactive role would require that we actually hired at least a part-time person to handle just code enforcement, but that would be the most equitable process. You know, I'm not saying necessarily that's the path we should go, but if you want to be equitable, being complaint-driven does not create an equitable system. So I think it does warrant further discussion with council to see if that's something that this body would be interested in pursuing. I also want to mention Kenai Silver Salmon Derby, September 13th to the 18th, $10 for a day ticket, $50 for the whole thing. We have a grand prize of $5,000 for the winner, for the adult, $1,000 for the kids, plus $100 a day prizes. So total prizes is about $7,000, I believe, close to $7,000. We also have some auction prizes. So where Tuesday to Sunday is the Derby, next Monday we are going to have the final spin of the Magic Wheels over at the Chamber Building at 5:30 p.m. That will generate the overall winner. So that will be the $5,000 prize and the $1,000 prize. In addition to that, we're going to have door prizes that some sponsors gave us this year. So anybody who participated in the Derby and shows up to the final spin there at the Chamber will be eligible to receive these door prizes as well. So we're hoping that's going to drive folks to come to that final spin. I know Mayor Gabriel and I really enjoyed it last year, and actually the overall winner that won $5,000 was there, as well as the youth winner, both. So it was pretty neat for them to realize on the spot that they were the winners. So anyways, again, September 13th, 18th, looking forward to that. That's the 6th annual Kenai Silver Salmon Derby. And last but not least, the Bluff. I talked to Mr. Curtin today. We are continuing to slog through the core process, but no updates. We're still on schedule for that bid release in early April, and just continue to plug away. And that's all I've got, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Councilmember Winger?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Thank you, Manager Ostrander. Just a few questions following up on your report. When was the final Derby spin? What day and what time?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Winter. Sorry, I was speaking kind of fast, wasn't I? The final Derby spin will be September 19th at 5:30 at the Chamber Building.
Thank you for that. And then just following up on your code enforcement, I think we've heard just as a body quite a few complaints over this past year when it comes to code enforcement issues. With this position, would we be able to have it grant funded? Would we be able to look for grants to help fund this position to offset that expense?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Winger. You know, we haven't looked to identify any grants that would do that. My gut tells me that that type of grant would be difficult to get. Just not the type of thing you typically see in grant funding opportunities available. We do have Larry still on working for us, and we could look for that as a possibility. I do think that, you know, this is a discussion that we'd have to have over the next couple months to figure out whether or not that's a path we want to go down. And I do think it's warranted that because we would be looking to increase code enforcement, that we could actually pay for that through our annual budget process. So it probably would make sense to then put this in the next budget and pay for that position in the next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Just a couple more things here. I had conversations with you about cleaning up the Little League field from the PU fishery. There's still a bunch of burnt firewood all over. Is there a time frame that we can expect Parks and Rec to go clean up the fishery remains?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Winger. I will touch base with Parks and Rec tomorrow on that.
Thank you. And then in the packet for a lay down, I had included 2 pictures of the dog park. Can you let us know where the dog park project is? I see that we have fencing and kind of what our, I guess, plan of attack is going to be. As you can see in this picture, this was the day after the heavy rainfall we have, and 3/4 of the property is underwater. So this will be a continual issue going forward, without addressing it. And I was just wondering, are we going to look at drainage? Obviously, we're not going to be able to open the park this fall or even spring at the rate of, I guess, scheduled work that still needs to be done. Can you kind of talk on where this project is?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Winger. I can talk about it at some level, and then Mr. Curtin can fill in if I miss something. You know, it obviously has been an incredibly rainy fall, and right now the dog park is so wet that you can't even get a piece of equipment in there. We are continuing to look at some type of drainage plan. It does need a drainage plan, obviously. We'll continue to work on that, figure out a drainage plan that will keep it from doing that in the future. But yeah, I mean, as far as what that plan is at this point, I mean, Mr. Curtin and I have talked about it multiple times. You know, this is a situation where, you know, we went into this without any engineered plan, so no grading plan, and it became very apparent that that's why you get a grading plan before you do that. We are going to fix it. Mr. Curtin has assured me we're going to have a dog park, but folks need to be patient because this is a unfortunate series of events that have created essentially a secondary Dobbin-Speck pond over there, and we will address it.
Thank you. And then just one more thing. Talking with the dog park committee, it sounds like they are ready to go. They just would request us not to open the park this fall due to the scope of work. But they have all the benches, the signs, the litter bags, the agility equipment. They have every bit of their stuff ready for this park. Are we going to be able to help accommodate the storage of those items, continued storage of those items?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Winger. I'm guessing we can accommodate. I'm not sure how extensive we're talking about, but we do have some storage space that we, if it's in people's garages and that sort of thing, I'm sure we can accommodate it in some capacity.
Thank you. I think they'd appreciate having some garage space this winter.
Further questions of the city manager? Vice Mayor Glendenning.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. At the end of last winter snow season, there was an offer or perhaps a conceptual thought that we would have a updated snow removal plan for our roads for this winter? Is that almost due for revelation?
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Vice Mayor Glendenny. And I know Mr. Curtin's been working on it. He could probably give us an update on when he expects to release that.
Mr. Curtin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the city manager. Councilman Glendenning, thank you. Yes, we have actually been working on it. Lisa List, my admin, and Kurt Wagner, our streets foreman, actually over the last 2 months have been coordinating. I was hoping to include some new GIS maps, and we kind of ran into some delays with some of our GIS software. But I do have draft documents actually on my desk, and my hope was to do a similar flyer card, similar to the one that you guys received for the water study that went out in June, along with having the full document on the website that kind of identifies our priority roadways and things like that. So we're about 90% done with the document right now. My hope was to have it actually to you here in the next, 2 meetings or so. We'll see if I make that, but that was the goal that I set out for Lisa and myself. So you will be seeing it here soon.
Yep. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, that was perhaps the number one bell ringer on my telephone over time, and never really did I get a second call back. Any questions I had were adequately answered, but in the view of last winter's snowfall, the offer was made that we would have an updated scheme, and I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Further questions of the city manager? Councilmember Knoxton?
Maybe more of a comment on code enforcement. I don't think it's a surprise that we do it the way we do, complaint driven. Otherwise, I mean, if you hire somebody to drive around town, which is one example, and just look for stuff, or we could use satellite imagery or a drone, you could kind of get to the point where, it publicly it becomes kind of a bit of a problem, if we're out looking for every little thing that might be a violation, and it is still kind of a spread out big town. So I think that having better code enforcement is a good idea, but I think how we implement it and how we look for it, or how we go about that, is very important, so we don't get too zealous out there, and I would not be supportive of that. So.
Thank you. Further questions of the city manager? Yeah, I think under that, what was running through, and it's kind of new to me, but just running through my mind was just, obviously you'd still have your complaint-driven reports. You'd have your obvious, corrective actions that would be taken, then also sort of policing of our conditional use permits that we saw with the chicken folks that, that we dealt with, that, maybe that kind of got a little away from us, but, my thoughts. So I still need to digest a little bit more, but that was sort of, quick brush was where I think we'd go. Councilman Weir? And
yes.
I don't mean to debate it right now, but just Councilman Weir.
Yes, I'm sorry. I had one other question for City Manager Ostrander. After our contacts, there was recently a sink that was damaged at the park by Beaver Loop, and it was flowing like a waterfall, and it was after hours, and some neighbors that had seen it, there was relative flooding to the park, did not know who to contact, and there's nothing on our website that tells them who's an after-hour contact besides calling into dispatch, and they were just wondering if we could maybe better that process or put who to contact with any public works type emergency or situation. I think they ended up getting a hold of the fire department ultimately, but just so that people in our community know what, I guess, the avenues of contact would be for a non-safety or fire hazard.
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Winger. No, that's a good suggestion. I will put that on my list and see if there's some sort of signage we could put up at facilities like that that could have some after-hours contact.
I know Tyler Best had mentioned with the Parks and Rec that they had purchased some new software program that would be able to put QR codes on signage so that they could scan it and it would go right into a porting. So maybe speaking with Parks and Rec, they would, specifically Tyler, maybe he would be able to help navigate that as well. Thank you.
Further questions of the city manager? See none, we'll go to the city attorney, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have no report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Is there any questions of our city attorney? Student Representative Thibodeau.
How's your day going, Mr. Bloom?
Well, it's going. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions of the, I always appreciate your brevity at this stage of the meeting, Mr. Bloom. I think most of the people do here too. Seeing no questions of the city attorney, we'll go to city clerk. Ms. Sainer.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Just a quick note, I will be over at the Borough Building for the majority of tomorrow. They are conducting the logic and accuracy testing on the ballots for our upcoming October election. And absentee voting in person will begin here on Monday, September 19th, 2022. You can vote here absentee in person at City Hall or over at the Soldotna Prep Building in Soldotna, depending on what's convenient for the voters. And that's my report.
Thank you. Any questions of the city clerk? Seeing none, we'll go to additional public comment. Is there anybody from the public that would like to address the council at this time? Ms. Nelson.
I would just briefly. Marion Nelson, remind me, what is the name of the grant or funding for improvement of, say, Lawton Drive and surrounds? What is the name of your money source for that, or the program or project? You were talking about it earlier.
The one we were just considering this today, this was the one that we were, that the borough had recommended we join as far as, there's two parts to that grant, right?
Okay.
There's authorization and
Well, that
implementation.
area, since I walk
Yeah.
a lot in both towns, that's the worst area of all. Around the school, the back part, around the high school and the middle school, that is an abominable bunch of sidewalk. It's old paving, it's humped, it's cracked, it's dangerous. If there's no way handicapped kids or adults or anybody is walking through there with any kind of safety, much less assurance that you can be sure-footed there, especially the portion that parallels Lawton Drive, that's right on Lawton Drive. That is tremendously bad. There's no other way to put it. It's that if that project becomes a reality, that would be the place to start for sure. I've mentioned it before. I'm mentioning it again. It's abominable. My dog doesn't even walk on that part of that sidewalk, if you will, with any kind of assurance. It's an up and down, back and forth situation.
Yeah, and that was just an example given of
It's a
how.
perfect one. It's a perfect one.
Yes, I agree. And I think there's, that's well used. And then, of course, when soccer goes on back there,
Oh, my
you
gosh,
have
yeah.
additional issues with parking and things like that, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I will applaud any kind of remedy to snow removal on the sidewalks all over town. I'd say that in both communities. You know, there's a lot of people that as I have discovered over the past few years, that have to use the sidewalk areas because they don't have any other way to get around. They're there for various reasons. And we could click off some of those reasons why they're there during the day, but there's a lot of footprints all over the place, or bike tires in the middle of winter, and it's really tough going, really tough going. So anytime any of the sidewalk or walking areas, street areas next to sidewalks can be cleared better, it would be a super asset in the wintertime.
Yeah, and just so you
For
know.
man or beast, and beast.
And beast. So that was a resolution that the title was a resolution supporting the Kenai Peninsula Borough's application for safe streets and roads for all action plan grant and authorizing the city of Kenai to be included as a joint applicant.
Mhm.
So this is kind of step one
Right.
of a few processes. Thank you.
Good.
Is there anybody else from the general public that would like to address the council at this time? Nobody online, nobody in chambers. With that, we'll go to council comments. Councilmember Petty.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I have no comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Student Representative Thibodeau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My teacher wanted me to say some things. We have a parade that starts at the Senior Center on the 23rd at 6:30. That's the, I believe that's the homecoming parade. I know that the marching band will be in that as well as all of the floats, so I look forward to that. We will be having the bonfire afterwards at KCHS, again, 23rd. And the homecoming dance will be the day after, the 24th, from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. We also have a game, a football game this weekend. It's, I'm fairly sure, versus, you know what, I'm not even gonna attempt it. I don't remember. But the marching band will be playing there. The varsity starts at 4 o'clock, and the JV starts at 1 o'clock. So look forward to being there.
Thank you. Councilmember Sonart.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So this summer, when we were deliberating through the Beaver Loop zoning issue, I did a lot of reading and research trying to figure out what the problem was and what the code says about conditional use permits, et cetera, et cetera. And in my research, I stumbled across this little thing called a home occupation permit that I didn't know existed. And when I read the definition of it, I'm kind of like, oh, I think maybe I need one of those to support what I've been doing the past 2 winters, which is the, I guess, the noisy private music lessons. No, music lessons. Hey, it's already out there. So anyway, I sat down with Ryan Foster and told him what I do, and he walked me through the whole application process, and so I did. I submitted my application, and it made its way through planning and zoning, and I was the one item on the agenda on the 24th. So I'm the Linwood Lane music place, and probably if there's any complaints from people on that street, it'll probably be Mr. Sonart. So, but anyway, that's the story behind that. And what is the gentleman's name that's stepping in as our interim planning director?
Mr. Best.
Mr. Best, yes. I had a very nice conversation with him and prior to the meeting. And at the meeting he asked me, he said, what do you think, how do you think the process could be made better so that maybe there are people like myself out there, especially since during the whole COVID thing where people tend to work more from home anyway, and maybe have a home office or would be in need of a home occupation permit, how do you make that process more manageable for people to know and to be aware? And my thought was maybe to piggyback upon the borough application for a sales tax number, because I had no idea that the city of Kenai required a home occupation permit for what I did. I mean, I went through the hoops of getting my state ID license, and I got my borough sales tax number before I ever gave one lesson. But I had no clue about the city process in this. So, and I'm sure I'm not alone. There might be other people out there operating, and they just don't know. So I was kind of thinking maybe if there's some way to get the information, to piggyback the information onto the borough sales tax application process. I don't know how one would do that, but it's just a thought. Because if I had known, I would have done it immediately. And I didn't know until I was doing all my research on Beaver Loop about conditional use permits. So there's the story behind that. And then last week I attended Assistant Fire Chief Mark Anderson's retirement party, and I wish him and Dory Lynn all the best as they head out and start their travels.
Thank you. I saw our city manager jotting down notes there, so yeah, maybe I agree. I think there's, you know, if there was a way to reference the land use table, which is kind of confusing, I think, to some people to even read that, but at least maybe trigger something that would, you know, sort of compel them to call the planning department to say, hey, I'm trying to think about this and would I require any sort of permit for it? So, good idea. Councilman Winger.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I had the pleasure of attending the Kenaitze tour for their new educational center last week, and if you have not seen the facility, it's amazing. It's beautiful. There was so much attention to detail and thought that was put into every aspect of the rooms. Today, Head Start started in their program. I've seen so many eager, excited kids ready to go off to Head Start today, so I just want to wish them all the best today in their grand opening of having students in the building. And I really look forward to see how that program there grows. And just want to say thank you to the tribal counselor and Peter for extending that invite to us. I also enjoyed Miss Sue Best and Mr. Mark Anderson's retirement parties. One thing I can say is it's always sad to see people with such a skill set leave. It's hard to fill those shoes, especially with Mr. Anderson, who served for us for over 20 years. I mean, you just can't replace that type of knowledge and wealth, and I just want to wish them all the best. And I also want to again say thank you to Mr. Max Best, who came in and helped us through our busy summer months for planning and zoning. I also got to go to an open house at Kenai Middle School. So all the schools are kind of operating on a normal basis this year. Kenai Middle School had us come in, the marching band performed and the choir performed, and then they gave us a schedule for our kids and said, here you go, get to class. So we had to run around to our kids' schedule to their classes, and they gave you 2 minutes between classes, and the bell would ring, and they said, you are now tardy if you're not sitting in your class. And 2 minutes was a little excessive. I finally, after about the fourth period, looked at my son and said, is this all they give you to get from class to class? And he said, no, I think they're just making it harder on the parents tonight. So I did enjoy that. It was great. Nice to see that the schools are opening up on a normal basis this year. Some of the schools are looking at planning their fall carnivals. So if you have any grandkids or young kids, bring them through those school carnivals. You know, a lot of the PTOs and PTAs have been hurting, being impacted, not being able to have their big fundraisers. And I just want to say, good luck, Cards. Go Cards. Homecoming week. As you can see, the bonfire is stacking up. It's always an awesome event. So if you can, get out and support our Cards. That's all I have.
Vice Mayor Glendenning.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I too attended the retirement parties both for Sue Best and Mark Anderson. And what I took away from it was the care and concern and dedication that the individuals and the crews or staff they worked with was displayed and articulated in both retirement parties. I was impressed, and the quality of people that we have hired and support one another in this city, I think is outstanding. I was just reflected on that. Usually I'm go off like I'm going to speak at Mark's retirement. I'd give the city attorney my can of pop and say, "Here, hold my beer. I'm going to talk." But it wasn't. It was. I was trying to be flippant. No, I was not. It was just trying to perhaps tone down my feelings that this was a cathartic moment, a moment of transition for not only Mark but for Sue, and I saw the again, I'm repeating myself, the care, concern, and commitment that the individuals had for their crew and for the city and for the people that they work with for each other, and I think that's just a gold star recommendation for anybody who would consider working for our city. I was pleased to support the Habitat for Humanity event or approval, and I think this is something that is necessary and needed, required in our town. Entry-level housing is so important, especially with young couples, young families who are forming households, and this is an excellent avenue for people to begin their life and establish themselves in our city. And I thought about all this time and 3 houses. Well, no, this season's burned up, okay? And you go to the last year, and you got to be completed by Christmas time. So really, it's not a lot of time. It's not a lot of time, but they have a good program. Thank you for your review on, reminding me of how it does work. And I think we should support any and all efforts like this. I also attended the City of Kenai election candidates was held in Soldotna. But anyway, it was over there. There was something about we couldn't hold it here, or some flimsy excuse. But anyway, everyone acquitted themselves well, and I enjoyed the debate. I learned a lot, and it doesn't hurt to go visit Soldotna once in a while. And then also, I'm just anxious. Probably Pumpkin Fest happens in October. Is that right? And we'll have an update. That's always a big event. When the mayor climbs to the top of the hook and ladder and drops a pumpkin, or that's the part I like. And just good on us all here for having a vibrant, engaged city, and I'm just pleased to be a part of it. And thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Basin?
Thank you. Good night. No comments.
Councilmember Nexon?
Thank you. Yeah, I just have to report, I too went to the grand opening of the People of the River Learning Place. I probably will not memorize the Kenaitze words for it, so I kind of prefer, for me, the translation, because it does fit. And the architecture in there was wonderful, actually. You know, the main room, where, you know, for dining and everything, it was just it was a kind of an open space with the structure kind of nicely hidden and melded in and everything. And into the classrooms too. The classrooms were of the river, so it started in the upper part of the river, and those colors and the animals that you'd have there. And as you moved down the hallway, it went all the way down to the mouth of the river, and the colors that you see at the mouth of the river, and the beluga and any other animals like that. So, you know, a lot of detail to nature and the art and all of that. Much appreciated that. And another thing I really enjoyed was seeing those that were in positions of leadership with the Kenaitze, folks that I went to high school with actually were there. And it's like, oh, you know, and I kind of knew some of them were, and some others, you know, were there too that are. And but also their children as well. They're old enough now where they're all involved there, and there was a lot of new people as well in the groups as I was meeting new people there. But it was really good to see all of these people taking leadership in the tribe and moving it forward. And I absolutely agree. The building is a work of art, and if you haven't had a chance to go through it, I'm sure if you go in there and ask, somebody will take you through, because they're very, very proud of it. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Tonight we have no executive session or pending items before us. Seeing no other business before this body, we are adjourned.